It's been almost exactly 1 year since The Keepers was released on Netflix. The 7-part series gave viewers around the world an inside look at the murder of a nun from Baltimore, Sister Kathy Sesnick, and also allegations of sexual abuse committed by priests at Archbishop Keough High School. It all happened nearly 50 years ago. The Keepers ended without solving the murder of Sister Sesnick. No one has ever been arrested in connection with that crime.
Yeah, as for the sexual abuse at Archbishop Keough, dozens of women, possibly more than 100, have now come forward. Many of them are still being treated by therapists, with much of that therapy paid for by the Archdiocese of Baltimore. But in some cases, the money has run out. A victim of sexual abuse at Keough sat down with WMAR2 News' Christian Schaefer to talk about her new effort to help all victims of clergy sex abuse put their lives back together.
For thousands of girls in the 1960s and 70s, being accepted to Archbishop Keough High School was an honor. Girls like Michelle Stanton, who now lives in Anne Arundel County. Early in her freshman year, 1969, she went to confession with Father Joseph Maskell, who was then the chaplain of the Archbishop Keough School. Stanton says Maskell abused her sexually inside of the confessional. A short time later, she started being summoned frequently to the office of the school's director of religious studies, Father Neil Magnus.
I could let my hair down. I could unbutton my top button of my shirt. I could roll my skirt up. I could smoke in there.
And Michelle remembers repeated sexual abuse that continued through her freshman and sophomore years.
I was told that I was this unique person and I was very mature for my age, and he understood me.
More than 20 years later, in the early 1990s, women started coming forward, claiming they'd been abused at Keough. Baltimore City Police started an investigation. A local attorney even put an ad in the Baltimore Sun looking for more potential victims. Michelle Stanton responded to that ad. 2 women, then identified as Jane Doe and Jane Roe, sued the Archdiocese of Baltimore, but eventually a judge ruled that because the statute of limitations had expired, that lawsuit could not go forward. Stanton was never called to testify. Fast forward more than 20 years again, and The Keepers was released on Netflix, featuring an interview with an anonymous city police detective identified only as Deep Throat.
I interviewed over 100 girls myself. Because
first hand or first?
First hand, because what happened was, as we're getting into this thing, we finally had to cut it off. Because, we had so many victims, we were going to go work on the best cases.
So many victims of the same men who had abused her, Fathers Joseph Maskell and Neil Magnus. That was the first time that Michelle Stanton realized there were many more women with stories exactly like hers.
I felt like I was being treated like I was a special person and that it wasn't happening to anyone else. And so there was no way for us to really touch base with each other.
Stanton has spent the past 12 years working as a therapist. She treats women and men who have been abused by clergy members.
With most people with trauma, I really feel that I have an incredibly deep understanding and depth of the degree of damage that they have endured and suffering. So I truly can empathize, and I think that develops a bond of trust. Many of my patients end up developing dissociative disorders or addiction problems, and so there's a lot of work to be done. You're really reconstructing and reparenting the person.
And that takes time. In the vast majority of cases, a lot of time.
It's not, a 6 or 8 session process. It's not even a 3 or 4 month process. It's a lifelong process.
But survivors who enter into a settlement with the Archdiocese of Baltimore can get a preset amount of money, which can be used for therapy. Stanton says for many of those survivors, the money, and with it their treatment, is running out.
To precipitously end access to that treatment, particularly if someone is seeing someone who is not in their insurance network, or who doesn't accept insurance, or that person has exhausted their insurance benefits, is unconscionable to me.
A spokesman for the Archdiocese of Baltimore told WMAR2 News that lifelong counseling services are available for victims of clergy sex abuse. A victim can receive counseling from a therapist of their choosing, paid for by the Archdiocese. But some victims have chosen instead to go through a mediation process, which ends with a financial settlement. If a victim chooses mediation, they must be represented through the process by an attorney, and the Archdiocese says it's made clear in that process that if they choose a cash settlement, they are foregoing the opportunity for lifelong counseling services. Even so, Michelle Stanton says there have been many cases in which victims have not realized just how much help they would need when they accept a cash settlement.
There is no way that you can completely heal and, get through a whole course of treatment in a specific nominal amount of time. That just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in my field.
Michelle Stanton says she has tried to address this issue with the Archdiocese, even suggesting that churches hold special collections during their masses. Instead, now she set up a GoFundMe page, and the money raised will go to therapy for victims of clergy sex abuse whose cash settlements have run out. The Archdiocese of Baltimore also has an extensive section on its response to the abuse crisis and also to the keepers on its website. We have links to both of those on our website, WMAR2news.com.